This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where my guests are Chris Young and Susan Ottaviano. Chris and Susan are better known as the two Green Witches. Chris is a lifelong gardener whose acclaimed garden, Tiny Sir, is a certified wildlife habitat. And Susan is an artist, performer, songwriter and food stylist. Their new book is The Green Witch's Guide to Magical Plants and Flowers, Love Spells from Apples to Zinnias. And together, we take a light-hearted look at the power of plants to help you manifest your deepest desires.
Well, I have been a lifelong gardener. I was the kid that used to, I remember as a really, really small child, not knowing how people obtained flowers. And so I would get up early in the morning and we had some people that had lovely gardens in the neighborhood. And I would slowly take one plant from each garden and put it in my garden, hoping they didn't notice. That was before I understood how nurseries worked. And so anyway, I was always gardening, always doing stuff. And then I moved to New York. And I was, of course, disconnected from gardening, but I met a green witch there who taught me a lot of little tricks. And then I moved to LA and I went back to my gardening roots. And I have a garden now called Tiny Sir, which is kind of an homage to Big Sur here in California. I've been working on that for about 20 years. And a lot of my knowledge from that has been incorporated into this book.
Fantastic. And Susan, how about you? What's your background?
My background is I'm an artist and I'm a performer. I was a singer in a band called Book of Love for many years. I guess I still am. And flowers were subject matter for the songs a long time ago. I Touch Roses, songs we had. And I'm also a food stylist. I do food for magazines and TV, or magazines when we had magazines. And Chris and I really wanted to work on a project together and combine our talents. So we started on this and the whole concept just grew organically into this book.
It was kind of born over COVID.
Oh, okay. Yeah, makes sense. I think a lot of things were actually. It did give birth to some positive stuff. Can you tell me about the book?
It is a celebration of love and flowers. And we thought we wanted to do a book about flowers. And first it was going to be very simple. It was going to be a children's book, kind of an A to Z of favorite flowers. And then I put some incantations on each flower. I thought, well, that'll just make it a little more interesting and give you kind of a hint of the magical properties of each flower. And then we thought, well, what if we expanded it? And what if we put actual spells? And then we thought, well, what if there are recipes that we could incorporate into the spells? And then we thought, well, why not put some gardening tips? And then Susan and I are both kind of history buffs. So then we thought, why not put the origin stories of a lot of the plants, like some of the Greek history? And that's kind of how it organically came together over about a 4 or 5 year period.
And it was really organic because we kind of just added all the things we love to it. So it just kept getting bigger and bigger and more ambitious. And it really did happen the way that Chris told it.
Yeah, we wanted to make a book that we would want to have at our bedside.
There's a few questions out of that, actually. But the first one is that you describe it as a grimoire. And I wondered if you could explain what that is.
That is a witch's book of spells, just at the most basic. It sounds very fancy and scary, but it's just a book that, like, say you were a practicing green witch and you came up with some spell ideas, you would jot them down like in a notebook, and that notebook would eventually become your grimoire.
It's like a witch's diary.
Yeah, a recipe book.
Yeah. So, and it's like a special book, so a keepsake.
Yeah, and I get a lot of books that I read, and they're the sort of things that I do keep around me, and I sometimes struggle to remember to dip back into them. So it's a lovely thing to have. I think your book is good for that because it's so attractive to look at, and it is the sort of thing, you can dip in and out of. Some of the stuff in there is seasonal. How could people maybe remember?
One of the things is we have a little bookmark. We have a little pink ribbon that we're so excited about.
We're so excited about our ribbon.
We really are. You can mark the place that you want to refer back to next time. So you go back in wherever you want. But yes, this book doesn't follow the seasons. It really is organized by the letters, but there's a lot of seasonal tips in it.
But I do see it as a book that you just sort of open and close wherever you want. It's nothing that you have to go from top to bottom.
No, and maybe it might be the sort of book that might just fall open on the place where you need it.
Hey, yes. Magically fall open.
So it's interesting what you were saying, Chris, about the gardening, then the green witchcraft, then the gardening again. For you, Susan, I'm assuming that you are into green witchcraft. For you, what came first, the gardening interest or the green witchcraft?
I'd say both. These are all things that I've been interested in. And I think Chris and I came together over the gardening component. And then we came together over the green witch. And then it kind of expanded from there. But I've learned so much about plants from Chris.
Yeah, I sort of pulled Susan into the whole green witch thing over the years.
And what is green witchcraft?
Well, it's a very loose, free-form kind of witchcraft. There's no covens. There's no, I always say there's no secret handshake and there's no real rules. The biggest rules are knowing which plants are toxic and which plants can't be ingested, and to work with plants that haven't been chemically treated with insecticides or pesticides. But it's mostly funneling the energy of nature. And it's also the belief of magical herbalism. And there's an old guide that is kind of my Bible. It's called the Cunningham's Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs that I recommend everybody after our book.
So I've had a couple of people come on and speak about magic in various different forms to one degree or another. And I do feel that for me, the way I view it is that it makes me observe and understand nature on another level. So I come to gardening from a very practical background and have followed the traditional route into it via horticultural training, which follows a lot of traditional methods of gardening. But for me, there's always more to explore. And what I like about green witchcraft, or whatever you want to call it, is that it gives you a sort of ritualistic aspect to gardening.
Yeah, which is very grounding, I find.
Would you agree with that sentiment?
Yes, absolutely. We're really about empowering, and manifesting love and the different parts of green witchcraft in that way.
And Chris, do you feel it makes you better understand nature?
Yeah, it gives me even the Greek mythology, I think, in some ways, even though it is mythology, I think it gives me it makes the plant resonate on a deeper level with me. But I'm like you, I sort of come at it, and I'm mostly self-taught with gardening, but I find that the green witchcraft, it's kind of like what Susan often talks about with painting the plants. It causes you to really observe the plants and work with the plants and on a different level. And it just helps deepen your connection to the plants, I think.
I totally think that too.
One of our things that we say is smell the roses, just the awareness of everything, to try to be aware of all your senses in nature, in life.
Smell the roses, touch the roses.
Yes.
Really, really get to know them.
Yeah, I feel it's really important. And if that works for you as a way of putting you in touch with plants on a deep level, then it's fantastic. You did talk, obviously, about the book dealing with love spells. Is it exclusively about attracting love from another person?
No, it's kind of attracting love in a general sense. We have a couple spells where you can, like our jar spell, you can write down different kinds of traits of a person that you would like to have drawn to you. But it's not very specific other than, say, some of the recipes for basil. One of the things we do is to ingest the basil. Susan has this amazing pesto recipe that's in the book. So in that sense, yes, it's,
But we also focus on self-love and friendship and all different ways. I mean, love is the centerpiece of the book, but a lot of the plants are also for wealth and protection and love.
Even love of your cat.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is so important.
I think that could go under friendship.
Yeah, that goes under friendship. Furry friendship.
And do they work? Do the spells work for you?
I think what happens is it's about intention.
Yes.
I will say this isn't a love spell, but it's kind of like a tip. The other night I had a TV appearance for the book and I was super nervous because I haven't done TV. and I slept with a sprig of basil under my pillow, and I did not have any nightmares, which is what it's supposed to do. So I will say that works. But I think mostly it's your intention, doing the spells, focusing on the plant, focusing on the outcome, kind of grounds you into this intention. And it's just like anything, I think when you think of things, it attracts them to you.
Such as cooking with love.
Yeah. So it's intention.
Yeah, absolutely. Susan, do you feel the same?
Absolutely. That's what I was saying. Cooking with love, observing things. One of the things that we talk about is magical mindfulness, and the mindfulness of really setting your goals and setting your intentions on what you would like to see. It's like we have a lot of tea recipes, and the ritual of making tea, warming the tea, calming yourself down with the tea is all part of the mindfulness tip for us.
Yeah, cooking with love is such a strange thing. I find that if you really intend to prepare something with love, it does taste different. And I know that's probably sounds a bit woo, but it really does. I don't know whether it's
It does sound silly and woo, and yet it's true.
Yeah, I find it is. And I don't know whether it's because, it's the way you chop the vegetables and they're just more uniform and there's just this kind of intention to make everything look good and taste good. I don't know.
Or if it's the person who's imbibing it, if they're aware that you did it with love, and so it makes it special to them. And I don't know.
Well, we're trying to teach you how to appreciate the simple things as well. The simple rituals, it works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do believe it does. So thinking about some of the more specific items in the book, there are a few that I just wondered if you could chat about because they were completely new to me and I found them fascinating. And the first one was the Indian paintbrush plant. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Oh, yeah. That's actually, I was really excited about that plant because it's a California native plant. And I wanted to try to squeeze one because that's where I am. I'm in California. And we are like the 8th largest floral province in the world. So we have a very unique bunch of native plants and flowers. So I worked in Indian paintbrush, and my favorite thing about it is the Native American backstory or the origin story to it, which is about a little Native American boy who was kind of too weak to play with the other kids. And so he had taken up painting, and he turned out to be a great painter. But the one kind of painting he couldn't master was the sunset. He couldn't capture the glory of the sunset. So he asked the Great Spirit for help, and the Great Spirit led him to these special brushes that he used, and he painted, and this is all legend, he painted a masterpiece of a sunset. He was so excited, he scattered the brushes throughout a meadow, and where he scattered the brushes, up grew these flowers, and the legend is that from then on, they were called Indian paintbrush.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing that I found about the book was that particularly the recipes was surprising to me, and they incorporated plants that I would never think of as medicinal or edible. And one of those was the Queen Anne's lace flower and the jelly that you can make from it. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Queen Anne's lace is sometimes considered a weed, but it's one of the most beautiful flowers, and it grows wild. And we have a tip of using it in your bath for your skin, sort of to tighten up your pores. And the jelly has a really nice kind of sweet, tarty flavor.
Yeah, it's not overpowering.
Yeah.
I'm lucky because I have friends in Oregon where it does grow like a weed. So I'm going to have them send me some this summer so I can make it.
Brilliant. And I liked how your recipes were vegan as well, because that's personally handy for me. Are there any other kind of standout flowers or recipes that, you were really pleased to include?
Well, we love the yarrow tea is one of the ones that we really like. The pesto. We have a number of teas. We have a parsley tea. I love the vegan chocolate mousse. You should try that. It's a really good recipe.
And I love the use of soap. I love the soap recipe that we have for roses, because my inner old lady is a huge rose lover.
Brilliant. So how are you going to collaborate again in the future? Have you got any plans to?
We do. We're sort of, while we're doing press and stuff for this, I have been slowly working up a oracle deck that's going to be heavy on magical plants, but it's also going to have some surprises.
We're excited about it.
Yeah, I bet you are. Yeah. So if people are new to this, you mentioned obviously the book that you recommended, Chris. Was it Cunningham's book?
Yes. Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs.
That's it. Is there anything else that you would recommend, even sort of simple practices that people could start doing?
We would recommend that you be inspired by what we've done and kind of create your own spells and rituals. Use it as a jumping off point and just enjoy it. It's not an academic guide. It's really to inspire your own creativity.
Yeah, we almost tried to make it like a children's book for adults. It's so simple and so whimsical that I think it almost has that feeling, even though it's all serious and it's all real.
I love that. And so if I were to, for example, pick a plant that I was drawn to and find out how I wanted to work with it, I could then just write down my own spell or my own way of using it. Is that good enough? Yeah,
that's what we're saying. I mean, say we have this feverfew spray that we make with the feverfew flowers. You can decide that, like, wow, that sounds like a great idea. What if I did something with the rose petals that I have in my garden? What if I tried to make a jam with rose petals and not the Queen Anne's lace? Let me look up and see if I could do something like that. So that's why we're sort of saying, I hope it inspires people.
Yeah, it's a springboard to investigate more methods and ways of working with plants. Yeah, I really love it. And I have to ask you, my final question actually, your foreword to the book is written by the iconic Debbie Harry. You know, is she a green witch? Is she into this kind of thing?
I always say Debbie's not so much a green witch as she is magical. I just adore her. I'm lucky enough to call her a friend. I've loved her since I was a kid. And she loves nature and she's a beekeeper. I kind of got her started keeping bees. And that's become like a huge thing for her. And she was really into this book. So she's been very supportive and she wrote us a very lovely foreword. We're very grateful. We love Debbie.
Yes. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, Debbie.
Oh, well, I mean, I think a lot of people love Debbie and will be even more heartened to know that she is a lover of nature and plants. So, yeah,
she is.
Fantastic. So is there anything else you wanted to add before I let you go?
Noelle, if you want to find us, we're on Instagram. It's 2 Green Witches, the number 2, not the word 2. 2 Green Witches at Instagram. We're at Instagram.
And on TikTok too.
Oh, and we're on TikTok. I'm still trying to catch up to TikTok.
And can people see more about your own garden, Chris, as well?
Yeah, on Facebook, they can go to Tiny Sir of Laurel Canyon. And then they'll see millions of pictures of my garden. And there's a lot of my garden on the Instagram feed too.
A big thank you to Chris and Susan for taking us on a journey through green witchcraft and gardening. Thanks to Debbie Harry for being just as awesome as we all knew she was. And thanks to you for listening. Here's Dr. Ian Bedford talking about how invasive species integrate into their new environments.
It's usually the case that when a non-native organism is first found in a country, its potential risk to that country is swiftly assessed, and that sometimes it triggers a response to try and contain it, particularly when that organism has gained a reputation for harming native species, crops, or the environment in neighbouring countries. And with the ease of global travel nowadays, there are far more opportunities for these hitchhiking nomads to invade new locations. But why is it that some of these become such a problem for the places they invade? Well, just as the Vikings demonstrated 1200 years ago, nomadic invaders can be tough and adept at surviving and exploiting new environments, and that when they first appear, there's invariably little or no natural resistance to impede or suppress their advance. Nowadays, though, invaders don't arrive in longboats, wielding swords and axes, but mostly arrive surreptitiously amongst internationally traded goods. And the most common will be invertebrates that come in with imported plants and fresh produce, many of whom would already be on alert lists across the world, including here in Britain, where we aim to intercept them at our borders. However, it's not so easy with the amount of plant produce that we import, and so the number of invasive invertebrate species that slip through the net continues to grow. And this includes many that are now here to stay, such as red lily beetles, western flower thrips, and more recently, box tree moths, all of whom remain a problem for gardeners and growers, whilst gaining a place amongst Britain's biodiversity. However, it's not always so that an invasive species remains a potential problem, as we've seen with the harlequin ladybird, which within 2 decades has become one of our most common predators of aphids. And in fact, some invasive species could justifiably be welcomed here if they benefit the environment, perhaps by bolstering the ecological role of a related native species that's struggling with climate change. And this has been the case with an invasive bee from mainland Europe, the tree bumblebee, which first appeared here during 2001. A distinctive black bumblebee with a fluffy ginger thorax and white posterior that has progressively become widespread throughout Britain, at no detriment to our native ecology. In fact, the tree bumblebee has become incredibly valuable as a robust pollinator of our crops and native wildflowers. And whilst being recognised as a woodland species in Europe, it does very well in suburban areas where it can be seen in gardens throughout summer and is often found nesting above ground in cavities or old bird boxes, from which later in summer a little swarm of bees will be seen buzzing around the nest entrance, which unfortunately might intimidate some people. But fear not, these will be the placid, newly hatched stingless males that are simply performing a routine known as nest surveillance, watching out for new queen tree bumblebees to pass by that they can fly off with to mate.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All Podcast.